Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and I'm here to revisit Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah because there's a particular issue which I feel needs addressing. In a lot of the kaiju-themed Facebook groups I'm a part of, there's been a debate as to whether or not this movie's time travel plot actually makes sense.
My initial review presented the idea that it doesn't. However, more and more people are coming forward saying that it does, and this is thanks to Toho providing an official explanation for what happens in the movie. The GODZILLA channel even devoted an entire video to showcasing this official explanation.
What is that official explanation, I hear you ask? Well, it goes something like this.
When the Futurians went back in time to erase Godzilla from history, they made a fatal error in assuming that there was only one Godzilla. In actuality, there were two, the original one who appeared in 1954 and a second one who, in this case, first appeared in 1984 during the return of Godzilla. It was the second Godzilla the Futurians wound up targeting and moving from Lagos Island to the Bering Sea, which was what mutated the dinosaur into the Heisei Godzilla. This means that rather than changing the timeline, all they did was cause the very events they set out to avoid.
Okay. It's been a while since I've had to do that. Now, the explanation states that what we're seeing is the stable time loop theory, which states that when you go back in time, history cannot be altered. If you go to the past and try to alter a particular event, you will either fail miserably or you will wind up directly causing the event. Either way, history remains unaltered and there's nothing that can change that.
So at a glance, this explanation, which I remind you is official, meaning it's definitely what happens in the movie, seems to be the right one at first glance. It manages to explain things like how everyone remembers Godzilla even though he was supposedly erased from time, because he was never actually erased and the timeline was not changed at all.
So that means all my frustration and confusion at the seeming plot holes in this movie was just the result of me not paying attention, right? Wrong. Because there's a particular snag in this theory which, when pulled, causes the whole thing to unravel.
You may recall that when the Futurians first arrived in 1992, they came with a warning that Godzilla was soon to rise and completely wipe Japan off the map.
Because in the century that we come from, there's no longer a Japan.
How could that possibly be? And why?
Very shortly, Godzilla will come back to life and wreak havoc on Japan. He'll destroy nuclear plants.
This is revealed by Emmy to be a dirty lie. Japan isn't destroyed in the future. It is in fact the most prosperous, most powerful nation in the entire world.
Actually, we made up the story about Godzilla. He never does destroy Japan. Later on, Japan will become even stronger, the richest nation of the 21st century. Japan will be bigger than China, America, and all of Europe. No nation will compare to it.
Ergo, the goal of Wilson and Glenchico is not to prevent Japan's destruction, but to cause it, hence why they attempt to erase Godzilla and replace him with King Ghidorah.
Now, according to the official explanation, all the Futurians did was create a stable time loop wherein nothing about the past was altered. Remember this, it's important.
After King Ghidorah is killed and Godzilla begins his own rampage, Emmy returns to the future to make Mecha King Ghidorah, retrieving his body because...
King Ghidorah should be well preserved. See what it's called.
Still the dumbest line in the movie, but that's off topic. When Emmy goes back to the future, we learn what happened to Japan between 1992 and 2204.
It was destroyed by a monster because of its vain prosperity. Lack of concern about nuclear waste.
That's right, folks. Godzilla wiped Japan off the map, just like Wilson, Glenchico, and Emmy originally lied about.
So allow me to make this as clear as possible. According to the official explanation, the Futurians went back in time to change history, but failed, creating a stable time loop. And that stable time loop changed history. That's impossible.
Remember, the stable time loop theory states that history cannot be altered, period. Nothing you do can change the past, and to the Futurians, everything prior to 2204 is the past. They went back, did not alter the timeline in any way, and this non-alteration somehow changes the future? Sorry, but you can't have it both ways like that. The stable time loop theory precludes that possibility.
Bear in mind, everyone, this is not a fan theory. This is the official explanation. Inarguably, without debate, this is what happens in the movie. This is the thing that's supposed to close the plot hole, but instead, it just makes it even bigger.
So what if we tried applying a fan theory to fix it? There's always the alternate realities theory. This states that if you travel back in time to meddle with the past, you would not be going back to your past, but the past of another dimension. So any actions you take there could alter the future, but not the future of your own reality. So is it possible the better explanation is that Godzilla was erased from another timeline?
Well, no. And we can prove that unambiguously.
Remember, Emmy leaves the Dorats behind on Lagos after the Godzillasaurus has been moved, and when the Lagos expedition returns to 1992, there's King Ghidorah. Had the alternate realities theory been at play, they wouldn't have returned to a future where King Ghidorah was present, nor would Emmy have been able to show up later with Mecha King Ghidorah.
What about the divergent timelines theory? This is the idea that if you go back in time to alter a particular event, you create a new timeline that runs parallel to your own. I actually touched on this in another video.
There are those who think that all the Futurians did was create a divergence point between the Showa timeline and the Heisei timeline, causing the second Godzilla to show up in 1984 as opposed to 1955. Unfortunately, this theory's application is impossible to prove, and it's never even brought up as a possibility in the film.
The only answer I see left is to say the stable time loop was created by accident, and everything else that happens somehow does alter the timeline. But in that case, you may as well just go ahead and say that there are no rules for time travel in this movie because the writers were too lazy to come up with them. I think we have our answer.
You know, every time travel story ever written has a plot hole of some kind, regardless of how much thought is put into it. Frankly, it's unavoidable. Even knowing that, though, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah is practically in its own category of bad. It just might be the worst written Godzilla movie ever. This plot isn't just nonsensical, it's downright unsalvageable. Superman turning back time by reversing the Earth's rotation makes more sense than this. And that's the killer. There is no sense to be had here. When the official explanation can't fill the plot hole, nothing can.
So, sorry Wikizilla and anyone else who supports this theory, but there is no saving this dumpster fire of a script. It never did make sense, and it never will. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer, signing off. Well, if nothing else, the poster still looks good.